I'd been watching John Ward since dawn. He moved with the quiet ease of a man at peace, his black cassock flowing behind him as he walked the ancient streets of Vatican City. To anyone else, he was just another priest, one of many who lived within these sacred walls, but to me, he was a target. I didn't know who had hired me. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the job itself. The instructions had been simple. Follow Ward, find out where he is going and why. Only then was I able to end him. No details, no context. Just a name, a photograph, and a kill order with conditions. It didn't sit right. Most of my marks had secrets, debts, blood on their hands. Politicians, criminals, men who had long since accepted the idea that death could come for them at any moment. But Ward? If the intel was right, he was clean. A priest without scandal, without enemies. So why the hit? I kept my distance as I followed him through the city. He started his day with a chapel service, kneeling at the altar like a man with nothing to hide. After that, he walked to a small cafe along Borgo Paio, ordered an espresso, and read his Bible in silence. No meetings, no whispers, no clandestine messages slipped into his hands. Just a priest drinking coffee and reading scripture. I stayed outside, blending into the ebb and flow of pedestrians, watching, waiting, trying to find the thing that made him worth killing. Nothing. He finished his coffee, closed the Bible, and left a few coins on the table. Then he adjusted the strap on his leather bag and made his way toward the edge of Vatican City. I followed. Hours later, I watched him move through security at Fiumicino Airport, his one-way ticket to London in hand. I was already booked on the same flight. Where was he going? Why? And who wanted to make sure he never got there? I exhaled, stepping forward to claim my own boarding pass. Whatever the answers were, I'd find them soon enough. And then Ward would die. I boarded the plane without issue, my ticket placing me just one row behind John Ward. The flight was full, the kind of suffocating crowd that made moving unnoticed both easier and more infuriating. As I settled into my seat, I realized my immediate surroundings were less than ideal. To my left, an obese man wheezed into existence, his body spilling over the armrest like rising dough. His shirt clung to him, dark patches of sweat spreading like continents on a map. The unmistakable stench of body odor hit me like a brick wall. To my right, a baby, round-faced and already teetering on the edge of a meltdown, stared up at me with suspicious watery eyes. Its mother was preoccupied, oblivious to the way her child sized me up like some kind of villain in a bedtime story. I clenched my jaw and forced myself to ignore both. Ward, however, sat in serene contemplation, his Bible open on the tray table before him. His lips moved silently as he read, as though mouthing a prayer under his breath. His fingers absently traced the edges of the pages, lingering for a second longer than necessary before turning each one. Hours passed. The baby cried, the obese man sweat. I suffered. But Ward barely moved. He was lost in that book, reading with such unwavering focus that I began to wonder if there was something more to it. I caught a glimpse of the page he was on just before he turned it. The passage was familiar, though I couldn't recall from where. Something about demons, a herd of swine, and drowning in a lake. Then the page was gone, and I was left staring at the back of his head, my mind turning. I knew the story. Jesus casting demons into pigs, sending them to their deaths. A strange choice for light reading on a flight to London. What did it mean? And why did I get the distinct feeling that whatever Ward was heading toward, it wasn't just another church sermon? I adjusted in my seat, sighing as the baby grabbed my sleeve with sticky fingers. This job was getting weirder by the minute. The flight was mercifully over. I stretched my legs as I trailed John Ward through Heathrow, keeping a comfortable distance as we passed through customs. He moved with the same quiet confidence as before. No hesitation, no second guessing. He wasn't lost. He knew exactly where he was going. And he wasn't alone. A man stood near the exit holding a small placard with J. Ward scrawled across it in neat, precise letters. He was well dressed, black suit, dark tie. But something about him seemed off. Tension clung to his posture, his fingers tightening and releasing around the edges of the sign. The moment he spotted Ward, his entire body sagged with relief. Whoever he was, he had been waiting. Ward approached, and the man wasted no time in guiding him toward the exit. Outside, a sleek black car idled at the curb, the kind of vehicle that screamed money, but not too much money. I didn't follow immediately. I didn't need to. A separate car had already been prepped for me, courtesy of my contacts in London. The moment Ward's ride pulled away, I slid into my own vehicle, a nondescript grey sedan, and tailed them from a distance. The drive took them into the heart of the city, weaving through traffic until they reached their destination, Westminster Cathedral. Interesting choice. I parked down the street close enough to keep an eye on them without drawing attention to myself. Ward and his escort stepped out, lingering on the steps for a moment before disappearing inside. I waited. An hour passed. Then another. Eventually they re-emerged. Even from a distance, I could see the difference in the man who had greeted Ward. His exhaustion hadn't faded, but there was something else now. Emotion thick in his expression. He wiped at his face, his shoulders trembling slightly, not from fear, from grief. Ward said something to him. I couldn't hear the words, but the meaning was clear enough. A reassuring hand on the other man's shoulder, a look of quiet understanding. Then, without another word, Ward climbed back into the car. I exhaled, watching as the vehicle pulled away from the cathedral. This wasn't just a priest on a routine visit. Something was happening here. Something big. And I needed to find out what. The drive was long. Too long. Ward's black car took winding road after winding road, weaving its way out of London, through the suburbs, then into the deep rolling countryside. They weren't rushing. There was no urgency in their pace, just a quiet, methodical journey to wherever the hell they were going. I had to refuel twice. The first time was uneventful. The second, less so. We both ended up at the same petrol station. I kept my head down as I pumped fuel into the car, eyes flicking toward Ward as he stepped inside the station's small shop. His driver stayed by the vehicle, leaning against the hood, looking just as tired as I felt. I took my time, making sure not to draw attention as I watched him move through the aisles. He didn't grab anything unusual, just a bottle of water and a packet of Monster Munch. Of all things. A priest, deeply invested in scripture, reading about demon-infested pigs drowning in a lake, and here he was, munching on crisps shaped like cartoon monster claws. It almost made me laugh. Almost. I finished fueling up and got back in my car, waiting for them to leave first. A few minutes later, Ward and his driver pulled out, and I followed. The roads became narrower, the street lights fewer. The gentle glow of civilization faded behind us, replaced by the heavy black of a rural night. The deeper we went, the more I realized I had no idea where I was. Wales, probably. The twists and turns of the roads made it impossible to get a good read on the village's name as we passed signs in the dark. Every time I tried to focus, I'd lose sight of the target for a second, forcing me to keep my attention on the car ahead instead. Eventually the vehicle slowed. We had arrived. A small village, a quiet one. No bright streetlights, no bustling nightlife. Just a few old houses, a church spire barely visible in the gloom, and the sound of the wind rolling over the hills. I parked a safe distance, turning off the engine. Ward's car came to a stop outside what looked like an old rectory. He stepped out, his silhouette framed by the dim glow of a single street lamp. For a moment I just watched. 8 hours of driving, and I was finally here. Wherever here was. I had to leave the car at the edge of the village. It was too quiet here. Too still. A new vehicle rolling in at this hour would be noticed, even by those who had nothing better to do than sit behind their curtains and watch the road. So I ditched it near an overgrown hedgerow and walked the rest of the way in. The air smelled of damp earth and wood smoke. The houses were old, clustered together in the haphazard way rural villages tend to be. A few dim porch lights flickered, but most of the windows were dark. Then, in the distance, I spotted it. A pub. The only place still alive at this hour. I adjusted my coat and ran a hand through my hair, ensuring I looked like any other traveler passing through. My civilian clothes were plain. Jeans, a dark jumper, boots that had seen better days. Nothing flashy. Nothing that would stand out. I stepped inside. The warmth hit me first, followed by the murmur of conversation. The place was small, the kind of pub where everyone knew each other. A few heads turned as I entered, their eyes flicking over me in quiet evaluation before turning back to their drinks. Good. I moved to the bar, ordered a pint, and took a seat at the edge of the room, where I could watch without being obvious about it. I sat in silence for a while, letting the low hum of voices wash over me. Then, gradually, I struck up a conversation with an older man at the bar. Weathered face, heavy coat, eyes that had seen more than he'd probably admit. We talked about nothing at first. The road conditions, the unpredictability of Welsh weather, the usual. Then, after a sip of his drink, he glanced at me and said, "If you're planning on sticking around, best avoid Thompson's farm." I raised an eyebrow. "Why's that?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Someone up there. They've not been well. Not for a long time." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. But I had my lead. The barmaid was wary, her eyes darting toward the older man when I asked about Thompson's farm. "A few miles out," she muttered, drying a glass with slow, deliberate movements. "Down the road, then left at the old chapel. Can't miss it." I thanked her, finishing my drink, and left the pub without another word. The village behind me faded into silence as I walked. The only sound was the crunch of gravel underfoot and the occasional rustle of the wind through the hedgerows. No street lights, no passing cars, just the vast openness of the countryside stretching out in every direction. It took nearly an hour to reach the farm. I spotted the black car immediately. It was parked just outside the main house, its silhouette barely visible in the faint moonlight. But something was wrong. The doors were open. All of them. The driver's side, the passenger side, even the rear. No lights, no movement. Just a hollow, empty vehicle sitting in the dark. My instincts prickled. I slowed my pace, scanning the area. The farmhouse loomed ahead, an old structure with thick stone walls and a sloping roof. No lights shone from the windows. No sound came from inside. Where was Ward? Where was his driver? I crouched slightly, keeping to the shadows as I approached. My fingers brushed the grip of the knife hidden inside my coat. Something wasn't right. Something had happened here, and I was about to find out what. I'd felt fear before. True visceral fear. The kind that came when a job went sideways, when a gun jammed at the worst possible moment, when a man on the other end of the trigger wasn't ready to die yet. But this was different. A deep, suffocating dread settled into my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. Every instinct, every sharpened survival skill in my body screamed at me to turn around and leave, to get in my car, drive back to London, and forget any of this had ever happened. But I wasn't the kind of man who ran. I took a slow breath and moved toward the black car first. If something had happened, I needed to know what. The night was too still. No wind, no rustling trees, no distant hum of nocturnal life, just silence. I reached the vehicle, keeping low, my hand near the knife inside my coat. The open doors gaped like a carcass left to rot, and as I stepped closer, the smell hit me. Not blood, not death, something worse. I swallowed back the urge to recoil and peered inside. The seats were empty, but the interior was in disarray. A Bible lay open on the back seat, pages creased like they had been gripped too hard. A half-eaten packet of Monster Munch had spilled onto the floor. And then I saw it. The driver's seatbelt was still fastened, but the driver was gone. I took a step back, my pulse hammering in my ears. Ward had come here willingly, but something else had met him. And whatever it was, it hadn't let them leave. I exhaled slowly, forcing my nerves into submission. The dread still clung to me, a cold, unshakable thing that slithered down my spine. But fear was useless now. I had a job to do. Steeling myself, I moved toward the farmhouse. The heavy wooden door was slightly ajar, creaking softly as it swayed in the still night air. No light spilled from within, no welcoming warmth, only darkness and silence. I pushed the door open with the back of my hand, my other gripping the knife inside my coat. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something had gone very wrong. The hallway was a mess. Furniture had been overturned, a wooden chair smashed into splinters near the entrance. An old side table lay on its side, its drawers pulled out and emptied onto the floor. Papers, books, and personal belongings were scattered in chaotic disarray. There had been a struggle. The air smelled of damp wood, old dust, and something faintly metallic. Not quite blood, not quite decay, but something unnatural. Something that made my instincts scream. I stepped further in, moving carefully. The floorboards creaked under my weight, each sound too loud in the suffocating silence. No bodies, no sign of Ward. But the deeper I went, the more I felt it. The same crushing, suffocating dread from before. Something had happened here and I wasn't alone. The house was still but not empty. I could feel it. The tension in the air was thick, pressing down on me like the weight of deep water. Every step I took up the narrow staircase felt like a mistake, but I kept going. My grip tightened around the knife, hidden in my coat, knuckles whitening. Then I heard it. A noise. Soft, distant, and completely wrong. At first I couldn't place it. It was faint, barely cutting through the thick silence of the farmhouse. A low, wavering sound, almost like a breath, but not quite. I froze, listened, and then it came again. Ma. I blinked. A sheep. I stayed perfectly still, heart pounding, ears straining for another sound. The wind? The house shifting? Some trick of my mind? Then again, a slow, guttural, almost wet sounding. The sound sent a wave of unease through me, my stomach knotting tight. It wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from upstairs. I swallowed, my throat dry, and forced myself to move forward. Step by step, I climbed, each creak of the old wooden stairs a drumbeat against my nerves. Whatever was waiting for me at the top, it wasn't going to be a sheep. I should have left. Every instinct, every finely honed survival skill I had told me that whatever was in the house wasn't right. That the smart thing, the logical thing, was to turn around, get in the car, and drive as far away from this godforsaken place as possible. But I wasn't hired to run. I was hired to find out why John Ward had come here. And that meant seeing this through. I finished climbing the stairs, my ears still ringing with that sickly, drawn-out bar. But the second floor was empty. Nothing waiting in the hallway. No shadow lurking in the dim light. Just more overturned furniture, more scattered belongings. I exhaled slowly, pressing on. I moved from room to room, checking for any sign of Ward or his driver, but found nothing. Until I stepped back downstairs and into the living room. Something was different here. The space had the same chaos as the rest of the house. Books thrown from shelves, cushions torn from the couch. But the coffee table in the center of the room was eerily normal. 2 mugs sat there, still filled with dark liquid. Steam no longer rose from them, but they couldn't have been more than an hour old. Someone had been here recently. And they hadn't left in a hurry. Then I saw it. A dossier. It sat neatly beside one of the mugs, its dark cover stark against the old wooden table. It wasn't thrown aside like everything else, wasn't discarded in the panic of a struggle. Someone had placed it there deliberately. I hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward, scanning the room one last time. Nothing moved. I crouched down, flipping open the folder with a gloved finger. The first thing that caught my eye was a photograph. John Ward. Not a surprise, he was my target. But beneath it were documents, handwritten notes, some typed reports. I skimmed a page. Some of it was redacted, but words jumped out at me. Exorcism attempt unsuccessful. Subject unresponsible for 48 hours. Secondary hosts. Containment compromised. I frowned. This wasn't standard church business. I turned another page. A map, hand-drawn, showing the farmhouse and the surrounding area. One location was marked in red ink. Barn. A scroll underneath it read, "Do not enter." I stared at the words for a long moment. Then I heard the bar again. This time it was much closer. A chill ran down my spine. That sound, that wet, rattling bar was closer now. I forced myself to ignore it. My job was to gather information, and if Ward had come all this way for this, then it was worth knowing. I turned another page. The handwriting here was different, rougher, shakier. The ink bled in places, as if the writer's hand trembled whilst they wrote. The report was dated over a year ago, signed by the owner of the farm. It started small. At first, we thought nothing of it. Kids draw strange things all the time, but Alice, she wouldn't stop. Every day, new pictures, always the same thing. A figure, tall and thin, standing among the sheep. She said it was her best friend. She said he'd lived in the sheep. My grip on the folder tightened. I skimmed further. The family had assumed it was just childhood imagination, a phase, but then she started sleeping in the barn. We'd put her to bed, and every morning we'd find her curled up in the hay. She wouldn't say why, just that he liked it better when she stayed close. Her parents tried to stop her, lock the barn, but she always found a way in. Then the livestock started acting strangely. The flock wouldn't go near the barn anymore. They stayed at the far end of the field, huddled together. Even the dog wouldn't go near it. The final entry was even more frantic. The words scrawled as if written in hurry or panic. The lambs were due in spring. We waited. But when they came, none of them were alive. Not one. They were born twisted, wrong. We buried them, but Alice... The writing trailed off, and I turned the page, heart hammering. Alice dug them back up. The next part was smudged. I could barely make out the words, something about whispering from the fields, the girl talking to things that weren't there, and then I froze. There was a final line hastily underlined. He says we can't leave. A sharp creak sounded from behind me. I wasn't alone anymore. The weight of the dossier in my coat felt heavier than it should have. I turned slowly, every muscle coiled, every instinct on high alert, and there, standing in the doorway, was John Ward. He wore the same priestly attire, the same humble smile on his face, but something about him felt off. His posture was too relaxed, too still, like he was waiting for something. We stared at each other in silence. 1 second, 2 seconds, 30 seconds. The air between us was thick, suffocating. My heartbeat hammered in my ears. I half expected him to lunge at me, to say something, to do anything. But he just stood there, smiling like we were two old friends sharing a quiet moment together. Then finally he spoke. "Welcome to the abode." His voice was calm, warm even, a voice meant to soothe, to reassure. It didn't. I swallowed my unease and nodded once. "Thanks." Then, keeping my tone light, I added, "But I was just leaving." Ward didn't move. The smile didn't falter. He just stood there, blocking the only exit. I let out a slow breath. "Would you mind stepping aside?" Nothing. No reaction. Just the same calm, patient expression. I sighed, already reaching for the pistol holstered inside my coat. I didn't want to kill a priest. Not tonight, at least. But if he wasn't going to move, I'd have to make him. I drew the gun smoothly, raising it to his forehead in one fluid motion. Last chance, Padre. I was already lining up my snarky comment, something about holy men and bad manners, when I made the mistake of looking him in the eyes. And that's when I realized they weren't human. My grip on the gun tightened. The eyes staring back at me weren't the soft, weathered eyes of a man who had seen too much of the world's suffering. They weren't even eyes at all. They were voids. Endless, black voids. Deep, hungry and shifting, like something was writhing just beneath the surface. Something alive. And for the first time in my life, I felt true terror. I didn't hesitate. The moment I saw those things writhing in Ward's eyes, I pulled the trigger. The gunshot roared through the house, deafening in the silence. The bullet hit dead center, snapping his head back. For a second, he just stood there, as if the shot hadn't registered. Then his body slumped to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. I exhaled sharply, heart pounding. The darkness in his eyes was gone. Whatever had been inside him had left. I didn't stick around to find out where it had gone. Tucking the gun away, I turned and strode toward the door. I was done here. I didn't care about the mission anymore. I didn't care who had hired me or why. Whatever was happening in this place was far beyond my pay grade. The black car sat waiting outside. I yanked the driver's side door open, ready to get the hell out of this cursed village, only to find the ignition empty. No keys. Frowning, I checked the glove compartment, the cup holders, the floor. Nothing. I swore under my breath and turned back toward the house. Ward didn't have time to hide them. He must have had them on him. I crouched beside his body, rifling through his pockets. Still warm. The smell of gunpowder lingered in the air. My fingers brushed over rosary beads, a folded note, a vial of something thick and dark. But no keys. I sat back on my heels, exhaling sharply. For fuck! Movement. From the corner of my eye, I saw something shift. I snapped my head up just in time to see a shape slipping into the barn. I froze. It wasn't Ward. It wasn't the driver. It was something else. I should have left. I should have walked away, disappeared into the night, and never looked back. But I didn't. Because some deep, gnawing part of me, some reckless, curious part, wanted to know. Before I could stop myself, I was moving. Gun drawn. Steps slow and measured, following the same shape into the dark. The barn was dark. The only light came from the car's headlights, thin beams slipping through the gaps in the wooden boards. Dust swirled in the air, catching faintly in the glow, and the smell. God, the smell was thick with copper and rot. I stepped inside, gun raised, breath shallow. The moment my eyes adjusted, my stomach twisted. The entire family hung from the rafters. The father, the mother, the two sons, and even the driver. Their bodies had been gutted, strung up in mock crucifixion, arms outstretched, heads slumped forward, entrails dangling like grotesque ornaments. Blood had soaked into the straw beyond them, forming thick black puddles in the dim light. Flies buzzed in frantic circles, feasting. The driver, who had picked up Ward from the airport, was hung the highest, his face twisted in an expression of agony. His ribs were cracked open, his heart missing. I swallowed hard, forcing down the bile rising in my throat. Then I noticed the absence. The girl, Alice. She wasn't here. My grip on the gun tightened. A noise, soft, shuffling, came from the back of the barn. I turned sharply, gun aimed, breath hitching. The shadows were deeper. The car's headlights didn't reach that far, leaving only blackness between the wooden stalls. Something was there. I could feel it, watching me, waiting. I forced my voice to stay steady. Alice? Silence. Then, a wet, drawn-out bar echoed from the darkness. Low, rumbling, and wrong. My blood ran cold. At first, I thought it was just a sheep. The soft padding of hooves. The shape stepping cautiously in the light. My heart slammed against my ribs, but when my eyes fully registered the creature in front of me, I felt the faintest sigh of relief. Just a sheep. Just a goddamn sheep. I exhaled sharply, lowering the gun a fraction. And then it moved. Not like an animal. Not like anything natural. The head rose. higher and higher. My breath hitched as the thing's neck stretched impossibly long, vertebrae popping like the cracking of knuckles. Its skull scraped the rafters, tendons creaking under its own weight. I watched in frozen horror as more stepped into the light, except they weren't more. They were one. A single writhing mass of sheep, their bodies twisted and fused together like something stitched from a nightmare. Their legs bent in the wrong directions, fur matted with blood and filth, mouths twitching, some moving soundlessly, others screaming. I took a step back, my boots sticking slightly to the blood-soaked straw. And then I heard her. Alice. Her body was part of it. Her small form tangled in the shifting horror, limbs distended, her face peeking through the mass of writhing wool and flesh. Her mouth stretched wide in a silent wail, her eyes blank. But she was still alive. Somehow. A high-pitched wobbling bar echoed from deep within the thing, rolling through the barn like a death rattle. The thing stepped forward. The barn shook with the weight of it, the wooden boards groaning beneath its shifting mass. The wet stink of blood and damp wool filled my nostrils, choking me. I didn't think. I just fired. The first shot hit center mass, if this thing even had a center. The second tore through a tangle of fused limbs, splintering bone and spraying something thick and black against the straw. It screamed. The sound was a grotesque mix of guttural bawling and a child's voice sobbing for help. Please. I kept shooting. Each bullet sent tremors through the thing's mass, causing it to recoil, but it didn't stop moving. The wounds didn't close, but they didn't slow it down either. I emptied the clip. Click, click, click. It still loomed. Still, Alice cried out from within it. It hurts. Make it stop. She sobbed, her voice thin and warbling, merging with the tortured bleats of the flock. My hands were shaking, my mind was screaming at me to run. I ran. I ran like hell. Boots pounding against the blood-soaked straw, lungs burning, my mind screamed at my body to move faster. The thing behind me laughed, a horrible garbled mix of sheep bleats and child sobs, warping into a low, wet chuckle that slithered down my spine. The moment I cleared the barn doors, I sprinted for the car. But the thing was fast, too fast. A skittering, chittering sound filled the air as it burst from the barn, its dozens of twisted, malformed legs hitting the ground like the crackling of snapping bones. The way it moved, shifting, lurching, but with horrifying precision, made my stomach lurch. It was playing with me. I had seconds to react. The thing cut me off, its massive, heaving form sliding into place between me and the car. I barely had time to shift direction, throwing my body down and sliding beneath the car. My coat snagged on the undercarriage, but I ripped it free, scrambling out the other side. My heart pounded as I sprinted for the house, my boots slamming against the mud-slick ground. The keys, the bodies, I hadn't checked them. Maybe I still had a chance, maybe I missed the keys on Ward's body. I reached the doorway, my hands shaking as I tore at Ward's body. Nothing. Rosary beads, that same folded note, but then... My fingers brushed metal. I pulled free a silver cross. Not a cheap one, not some meaningless trinket. It was heavy, ornate. This was something old, something powerful. Behind me, the sound of splintering wood erupted as the creature crashed into the house. I turned just in time to see it charging. I had no plan, no time to think. I just lifted the cross. The thing froze. 50 unblinking eyes locked onto the silver. For a second, just a second, I thought it worked. Then it smiled. Every single face grinning, teeth too human, too wide. And then all of them turned their eyes toward me. I stood there frozen as one of the many malformed limbs reached forward, slow, deliberate. It didn't snatch the cross. It didn't rip it from my hands. It gently took it, turned it, flipped it upside down, and placed it back into my palm. The room spun. The thing chuckled low, knowing, amused, before it rose up, towering over me. The cross felt heavier now. I realized something far worse. The priest had been a good man, an innocent man, and even he couldn't stop this. The bars grew louder, louder than anything I'd ever heard in my life. It wasn't just sound, it was force. It crashed over me like a tidal wave, reverberating in my skull, drilling into my bones. My knees buckled, my hands slammed against my ears. But it did nothing to stop the noise. The walls of the house shook. The air felt thick, pressing in from all sides, suffocating, crushing. Then, it spoke. A voice beneath the chorus of wailing sheep. Deep, ancient, and wrong. I didn't understand the words, but I felt them. They slithered through my mind like worms burrowing into the folds of my brain. My vision blurred. The floor tilted beneath me, and then it moved. The mass of it, the sheer weight of the thing rushed forward, enveloping me in the tangle of damp wool and suffocating heat. The stench of rot and sweat filled my lungs, thick, gnarled limbs coiling around me, squeezing tighter, tighter. My ribs groaned under the pressure. My veins screamed as my blood struggled to move. My mind fought to stay conscious, but the weight, the impossible, unholy weight, dragged me under. The last thing I heard before the darkness took me was laughter. Low, amused, knowing. I woke up with a jolt, gasping for air. Everything was wrong. The sky outside the window was too bright, too clear. The hum of the plane beneath me was mechanical, but the sound felt distant, like I was underwater. I rubbed my eyes, trying to clear the fog from my brain. My head was pounding like someone had taken a sledgehammer to it, and my mouth tasted like ashes. I was disoriented, too disoriented. I looked around. The seats were plush, first class. The lights above were dimmed. No one was talking. No one was looking at me. It had to be a dream, right? It had to. The barn, the creature, the family, the cross. It couldn't have been real. But then I looked down at my hand. The cross was still there. It was warm and heavy. I felt my chest tighten, my breathing turning ragged. It was real. It had all been real. The creature, the barn, the priest, everything. I was still alive. I didn't know how, but I was alive. A shoulder on my hand. A soft voice. "Sir, are you all right?" I turned to see a flight attendant standing beside me, concern on her face. Where are we headed?" I forced out words, my mouth dry, throat tight. "Vatican City, sir." The words hit me like a slap. I stood, my hand shaking. I had to clear my head. I had to get out of this seat. I stumbled toward the restroom. The cool metal of the door felt grounding against my fingers as I pushed it open. The flickering fluorescent lights above me made everything seem too surreal. I stepped in front of the sink, splashing cold water on my face, trying to fight the panic that was rising in my chest. It didn't work. I stared at myself in the mirror, eyes wide, hands pressed against the cold metal. And then I blinked. Twice. Just briefly. A second, maybe less. But in the reflection I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. My eyes. For the briefest moment, I could swear I saw them. Those rectangular pupils, wide and slit like something not human. My heart stopped. I stared at myself, unable to breathe, unable to process the horror clawing at my chest, and then the reflection smiled. I didn't. The bathroom door clicked open behind me, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The story was over, but something inside me knew it wasn't over for me. Not by a long shot. And I wasn't the same anymore.